Okay, so we're doing part two. Now, normally, first of all, what's a part two for? It's part two of Midvar Sheker Tirchak Is on not lying. The issur to lie is whenever allowed to lie. So normally, part two is the week after part one. But 2 weeks ago, I lost my voice. Last week, I was away. So there's 3 weeks or 2 weeks in between the two shiurim. So we're going to quickly, if you remember in the last year, we went through like 9 different Gemaras to get an idea of a feeling of where one is allowed to lie, where one is not allowed to lie. Tonight, I would like to really focus on 2 Gemaras. And then the amazing thing is that one of the Gemaras is like kind of like, you wouldn't think it's so halacha l'maisa, and we'll see the Shevet HaLevi, Rav Vosner, comes along, and he just brings out, it's always a pleasure, Rav Moshe Feinstein does this often, he gives like one gather, he gives one definition of when one is allowed and how one is allowed to veer from the truth, and then it's very, very practical. So, without further ado, so number one on the source sheet is the Gemara in Ksubas we saw last time, the famous Gemara, on Daf Tes Zayin, Kala, how does one dance in front of the Kala? In other words, what does one say to the Chassan is the mitzvah to endear the Kala to the Chassan? What does one say to the Chassan in order to endear the Kala to him? So, Beishami Oimrim, Kala Kamoy Shehi. You have to say it the way it is. If she's not so pretty, so you say, listen, you did an okay job. You know, it's okay. She's okay. Beis Hillel say, Kala No'ev Chasuda. You have to say that she's a No'ev Chasuda. She's a pretty bride. So Bisham say, I don't understand. I'm going to if she was limp or she was blind or she had a big nose or a big mole or whatever it might be, she's cross-eyed. You're going to say she's pretty. Midvar Sheker Tirchak. The Torah says you can't lie. So what's the heter here to lie? There's no heter to lie. Beis Hillel respond back to Beis Shammai with Divreichem according to you. Misha lokach mekach ramin hashuk. What do you do if a person buys a new car and you know that he got ripped off, or you know that the car isn't really so good? He bought a house and could have gone 3 houses down, got it for half the price with better neighbors. So what do you tell the guy? What do you tell him? Do you praise what the person bought even though it's really not worth it? Or you tell him like it is. Tell him, you know what, you could have done much better. Of course, you're going to praise it to the person. Here Chazal said that a person should always try to endear himself to the community, to endear himself to people. He should, if they're Rishayim, obviously doing the wrong thing, obviously not, but talking about regular people, you should always try to be daitoi revis and habrius, which means that, you know, a person gets on with everyone, gets along with everyone. So it's a very interesting Gemara. Beis Shammai have a very clear halachic issue with what Beis Hillel are doing, and they're saying it's sheker. Beis Hillel's response is kind of, well, what are we supposed to do? You can't say the truth. If you can't say the truth, you could lie. How are we to understand this? So in number 3, the Gemara in Yevamos we saw last time, we're going to speak it out outside this time. And that is, the Gemara there brings a number of times where one is allowed to lie. Bedavar hashalom, the Gemara says. Mutaloi la'adam l'shanois, doesn't say l'shakar, it says l'shanois. A person can change his words, bedvar hashalom, for peace, for shalom. And the Gemara brings 3 examples. Let's speak out 2 of those 3. The Malachim come to Avram and Sarah and tell them you can have a child next year. Sarah laughs. She says, after I got old, Lamaisa, my period came back. So I'm a young woman again, physically. But my husband is still very old. And she laughed. And when Hashem says it over to Avraham, Hashem says that, you know, your wife Sarah was laughing because she said that she's old. Really, she said, I'm old, but I got young. My husband's too old. Hashem was mishana. He changed from what she said, and Hashem said that, no, she said, she laughed, and it was a lack of bitachon on her level. She laughed because she felt she was too old to have a child. So Avraham Avinu wouldn't have been offended that his wife is blaming him for not being able to have a child or laughing because of him. So Hashem changed that to preserve the peace. A little later on in Chumash there, when Yaakov Avinu dies, so the brothers were afraid that Yosef now is going to seek revenge. So they made up and they said, it's the one that didn't really happen. They said that our father told us to tell you not to bother us. Those are two examples where you can change l'shanois b'pnei hashalom because of peace. So we spoke out 3 weeks ago. The Tosfos Yeshanim, it's a commentary in the side of the Gemara over there in Yevamos, Balei Tosfos, who say that it's not a shinui gomer. They say where it's mutter to be mishana because of darkei shalom, it's not a real shinui. Just because Sarah really said, I'm too old to have children. But then my body went back and became like a younger body. And now it's my husband's fault. He's too old. We can't have kids. So says the Tosfos Yeshanim that Sarah did say that she's too old as a reason not to have children. But then she qualified right away and said, but everything's changed with me physically. And it's my husband's fault. So what Hashem did was Hashem said to Avram words that Sarah herself said. So that minimizes the sheker. That minimizes the shinui. It's not a shinui gomer. It sounds like the Tosfos Yeshanim that if she would have just said, my husband's too old, those are all the words that she uttered, my husband is too old, then Hashem would have no choice but to say that to Abraham. But since she said she was old, but it's not a problem, and my husband's the problem, so Hashem can, or a person can be mishan if it's not a shinui gomer. So this probably reminds us all of the Maisa with Esav and Yaakov, where Yaakov comes in with the food that Yitzchak requested, and he wore the fur on his arms. He's wearing Esav's begadim, and Yaakov and Yitzchak asks, "Who's there?" And he answers, "Anochi Esav b'charecha. I am Esav, your son." So Chazal say, Rashi on the spot says, "It's Anochi Kama Yaakov. I am Yaakov. Esav b'charecha. Esav is your b'chor." So we're always bothered. We mentioned last year. We're always bothered that's still lying. Because you can put a comma somewhere, but you said Anochi Esav b'charecha, right? So that means I am Esav, your son. What does it help that on some level, if you put the pen to the paper and you add a comma here, so you totally change the meaning, so it's not a sheker? It always bothered me. But Lamaisa, we see here in the Tosfos Yeshanim, we have a makar, we have a raya that there is an inyan in being mishana, not a shinui gomer, only being mishana a little bit. And we're about to take it a step further. That's the thesis we're putting out now is that sheker is mutter, not telling the truth is mutter for darkei shalom, to preserve the peace, when it's not an outright lie, when there's a way to construe what the person is saying as being the truth. So I want to skip a few minor kindness. I actually want to run to the 10th Ma'ar Makom, which is Maseches Kala Rabasi. Maseches Kala Rabasi, there are a number of Masechtas, of short Masechtas. They put it in the end of Seder Nezikin. It's after Avodah Zarah. It's not really part of Shas. They just put it there. And you have there Maseches Kala, Maseches Derech Eretz, Maseches Derech Eretz Zuta. They're primarily brises. They have a little bit of Gemara here and there. So the original source of this Shakla V'Tarya with Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai that we saw in source number 1 from the Gemara in Ksubis, the real source is in Maseches Kala Rabasi in Perek Yud, the 10th chapter of Kala Rabasi. Now, these Masechtas weren't learned as much. And therefore, the text, the girsa, is I don't want to say it's off, but it's hard for us to understand. The Gemaras that were learned a lot, so they're very careful with the text. And you can have a machlokes in the Rishonim how to understand the text, and they'll change things to make it. You have the Marsha working on the text, and a lot of effort is being put in to make sure there's a clear text. In these Masechtas, it doesn't flow as well. So the Maseches Kala Rabasi says, Beis Hillel Nami Leka Hachana. Beis Hillel responds back to Beis Shammai. When we say the Kala is Na v'Chasuda, when the Kala has this massive this tremendous nose, and she has this big hairy mole coming out of her face, and she's cross-eyed, and whatever, and her ears are two different sizes, and we're saying that she's a kala noe v'chasuda, dilma noe b'maaseha. Maybe we mean to say that she has good midas, she has pretty midas, she's noe b'maaseha. Noe mibate avos. She comes from a good family. It's a beautiful family. Yankel, you mamash lucked out. She's beautiful. Her midas, wonderful family. The chasida b'denavshe, and she's a chassid herself. She's a pious person. So that's what Beis Hillel say. So we're not saying a lie, right? In our Gemara, we don't have that. Our Gemara, they just say back, well, what are you supposed to do? He bought a car. He bought a house. He has a wife. You're going to be Magana her? You're going to make fun of her? In the Kal Rabasi, Beis Hillel is saying that what's being said is not sheker because she's beautiful from her midas. And her family is our chasidim. So she's wonderful. Beis Shammai say back, Miksiv misheker harchik. Does it say distance yourself from sheker? Midvar. It says midvar sheker afilu stam. So I think what afilu stam means is even from a word of sheker. When you say noah v'chasuda, she's beautiful, that means that she's physically pretty. That's what beautiful means. So it says midvar sheker. The word dvar is an emphasis that the way it's going to be understood, that's what you're saying. So if you're saying she's beautiful, and the chasam will understand that as physical, not to mean that is a sheker. Because it's midvar sheker. There's an emphasis, even a dibur. Beis Hillel oimer ki amar rachmana midvar sheker, when the Torah is referring to dvar sheker, mishum v'noki v'tzadik hu. We mentioned last time that this pasuk midvar sheker tirchak is sandwiched in with other psukim that are discussing procedure in Bezdin, the proper procedure in Bezdin, to the point that we quoted a Urayan that says that it could be there's no Issur D'Oraisa to lie. It's only in the context of Bezdin if it's going to affect the judgment. But Stam, if you ask me, what did I have for dinner last night? And I say it was pizza, really was chicken, then there's no Issur D'Oraisa in that. The Chavetz Chaim holds in number 7, if we have time, we'll get to it. I don't think we're going to have time. Chavetz Chaim writes that any lie is 100% Asmi D'Oraisa, he seems to say. But that's a machlokes. So Beis Hillel say the dvar sheker that you're talking about, Beis Shammai, is only in the context of Bezdin. When you're in Bezdin, you're giving testimony. You can't say Ruvain killed Shimon. Ruvain's my good friend, and I killed Shimon, right? You can't say that. If Ruvain killed Shimon, Ruvain owes Shimon money, so that's what you mean. Not even tzaddik. When it comes to Bezdin, you're right, Beis Shammai. It has to be clear. But when it comes to Milei D'Alma, other things, you're allowed to say something that's objectively true, knowing that it's going to be misconstrued into a sheker. That's the chiddush, that's the Kal Rabasi. I want to see one more Gemara and then come to Rav Vosner's big chiddush. There's a fascinating Gemara in Brachas. There's actually 2 Gemaras in Brachas. We'll see one inside, we'll mention one outside. Rav Vosner only brings this Gemara. And Daf Mem Gimel Amid Beis. And the Gemara reads as follows. Listen to this. Tana Rabbanu. Heviu lefanav shemen v'hadas. We know that you make a bracha when you smell things. Barmiyah b'samim, atzei b'samim, isve b'samim, shemen, toiv. So if they bring a person, let's say, I think it's olive oil and hadassim to smell. So which one should he make the bracha on? Which one is more chashav? What gets kedima? The hadassim or the oil? Beis Shammai oimim, coincidentally or not, Beis Shammai say mevarach ala shemen, make the bracha on the oil. The Afrikach mevarach ala hadas, they make the bracha on the hadas. Two different brachas of birchus hareach. Beis Hillel oimim, Beis Hillel say mevarach ala hadas, the Afrikach mevarach ala shemen. Beis Hillel say first the hadas, then the shemen. So Beis Shammai say the shemen first, the oil first. Beis Hillel say the hadas first. But derech klal, how do we paskin like Beis Hillel? Hilchos like Beis Hillel. That's how we paskin normally. Comes Rabban Gamliel. Amar Rabban Gamliel, ani achriya. I am going to decide Who's right? Beis Shammai or Beis Hillel? I'm going to decide, says Rabban Gamliel. Zok der, shemen zachinu l'reicha v'zachinu l'sichasoi. Shemen oil, we merit smelling it, smells great, and we can also anoint ourselves with oil. We can anoint ourselves. So there's two purposes, two ways you can utilize shemen. Hadas, the reicha is zachinu l'sichasoi zachinu. By hadasim, we can smell it, but we can't anoint ourselves with it. So shemen is objectively more chashuv. Let's make the bracha on shemen first. So Rabbi Gamliel is machriya like Beis Shammai.
You can also use hadasim for a mitzvah.
Right, I guess that's a good point. But I guess here, shemen also you have Trumas Maisis, you have the shemen menorah, the Beis Hamikdash. But it's also al brachas. Okay, that's a good point. But I guess because shemen also is used for mitzvah. So I'm Rabbi Yochanan halacha gedirei machriya. Rabbi Yochanan came and he paskin. The halacha is like Rabban Gamliel. And this is one of those cases where we paskin like Beis Shammai, because Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yochanan both paskin like Beis Shammai. Okay. Now is where the story gets interesting. More interesting. Rav Papa ikla lebei Rav Huna breder Rav Ika. Rav Papa ends up in Rav Huna breder Rav Ika's house. Aislu kamayu shemen v'hadas. What do you know? They bring out to Rav Papa and Rav Huna breder Rav Ika oil, olive oil, and hadasim to make a bracha on the smell, on the reach. Shakal Rav Papa. So Rav Papa took the hadasim. Baruch ahadas bereishav hada baruch hashemen. First he made the atzei b'sam on the hadasim, then he made the shemen, whatever the bracha on the shemen is, on the shemen second. So everyone's looking at each other like, this is one of those cases, we don't pass like Beis Hillel. Amalei like several amar halach kedivei machriya. So Rav Huna breder Rav Ika says, Master, you don't hold like Rabbi Yochanan, like Rabbi Gamliel, that we pass him like Beis Shammai in this case. So what does Rav Papa say back? Amalei hachi amar Rava halacha kebeis Hillel. I pass him like Rava, who said the halacha is like Beis Hillel. Okay, so then at this point we'd say it's a machlokes how to paskin. Comes the Gemara, listen to this. V'loihi, it's not true. V'loihi. Leishtamute nafshi hu da'avad. Rav Papa, it's not true. The halacha is not like Beis Hillel. Rav Papa knew that. And he just said that to save face. Rav Papa, the Amoira, said that Rava told him the halacha is like Beis Hillel. In this case, even though that's not true, Leishtamute nafshi hu da'avad. He did it to avoid the embarrassment of doing the wrong thing. That's what the Gemara says. Says Rashi, V'loihi, in the box on the right, Rava never said this. Rava never said that we pass like Beis Hillel in this case. El Rav Papa Ichsif, he was embarrassed, the Fishatah, the Hishmit Atzim Bakach. He was embarrassed, he made a mistake, and this was the way that he got out of it by saying, well, Rava says this. Machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Rava, I go like Rava. So the shaila is, what's the justification for that? Right? The other Gemara is the famous Gemara with Rabbi Gamliel Rabbi Yeshua when Rabbi Gamliel asked, who's the one who paskin, was it where the Marav is a Rishusah, that it was a Tzechoiva? Right? There's certain stuff Rabbi Yeshua went against Rabbi Gamliel, and Rabbi Gamliel asked, who's the one who paskined against me? Was it you, Rabbi Yeshua? So Rabbi Yeshua said, if the person who heard me say that wouldn't be alive, so that I can say whatever I want and no one's going to contradict me. But if I'm alive and he's alive, if I'm going to say the other thing, then he's going to contradict me. So yeah, it was me. So what do you mean? You would lie? How could you lie? Everyone was asking, you're passing against him to say the truth. That again, Rabbi Yeshua, it sounds like he would have lied. He would have lied. So there's a Yid who was writing a sefer on Midvar Sheker, and he wanted a taina that if a person's embarrassed, he's allowed to lie. He's allowed to lie. If a person, I don't know, whatever it is, a person came late to a meeting, he says, oh yeah, I got a flat tire. He's embarrassed. It wasn't his fault. Let's say something happened. It wasn't his fault. I got a flat tire. If a person's embarrassed, if someone says, how come you didn't respond? I sent you a wedding invitation. So the emes is that you forgot. He said, I didn't get it. Or my neighbor brought it over to me today. Came to his meal, he never brought it to me. Right? So you're allowed to lie to save yourself from embarrassment. That's this person wanted to write. And he wanted to bring a proof from this Gemara in Brachos that we see that Rav Papa lied in order to save himself from embarrassment.
But I have a question though. This seems like a much more serious case that we're dealing with in Gemara and Brachos. The other lies are basically of no consequence. But here, where Rav Papa is telling him that Rava told me the halacha is like so and so, he could lead people to think the halacha is the wrong halacha, and they could start following that. That's a much greater consequence than saying I got a flat tire and that's why I'm late to the meeting.
That's an interesting point. It's definitely true. Lemaisa, the lying here, it's not like it's something that's Chilul Shabbos Daraisa that Rav Papa did, that he's saying that halacha is that it's mutter. To put it into perspective, it's a shot of which one do you make a bracha on first. That being said, halacha is halacha. I mean, you're making an excellent point that the case of the Gemara, it will lead to ziyuf haTorah potentially. All I'm pointing out is that the risk isn't so high. It's not an aveira. It's not mamash an aveira. There's a seder kedima to brachas.
Right, I hear what you're saying. So it's the wrong order of brachos. That's not mamash and avera, but still,
it's still a ziyuf haTorah. I mean, you didn't do the wrong thing. It's still wrong to make the bracha on hadassah.
Right, you're distorting the truth of the Torah here in order to save face. I find that more problematic.
I guess we see it should be a chizuk for us to make sure we don't embarrass anyone. The fact that Rav Papa was willing, and the Gemara is even saying that. See, it's interesting. The Gemara doesn't say whether he was right or wrong. I guess the Gemara doesn't censure that what he did, and therefore we're going to see that everyone's going to assume Rav Papa was right in what he did, and the question is why. But I'm just realizing now the Gemara doesn't even say that he was necessarily right. But it's a good point. So Rav Vosner in number 12 goes and he says, listen, it's hard to be kaveya halacha based on this Gemara. I mean, you want to pass in a massive chiddush, you could lie to save oneself from embarrassment. L'maisa, the Rif and the Rambam don't bring it down. And he goes on to some other halachic cheshbonis. And he says, you know what? Let me tell you my mahalach in that Gemara in Ksubas. The Gemara in Ksubas by Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. And he writes in the box on the right, in number 12. He says like this, he says, I wrote in another place, the Das Beis Shammai. What does Beis Shammai hold? The after I gaver b'daite v'liboy, the mashamin noy v'chasuda rotzoyne rak na b'maaseh. Even though the person, the wedding guest, when he says she's beautiful, he means in her midas. That's what he means. Mikol malkum hold Beis Shammai za'atzmoi shemishaker b'dibur the mishtama noy b'chol davar also. That which he's saying in a way that clearly will be understood in a way that's not true is aser. The gzeres hakasavu midvar sheker tirchak. Afilu enu meshaker el bedibur v'lei b'leiv. This is pshat in the Kal Rabasi. Even if he's not lying with his dibur, only with his leiv, it's a sheker. Mikomakom hu sheker. The aser lil baish afilu kavanas emes b'dibur sheker. It is aser to, I guess, clothe emes in a word of sheker. So he's saying sheker. He understands it as being pretty, and that's not true, and that's aser. The Beis Hillel lo yichashu lezen ikar adin, kevin da kavana al derech emes. Beis Hillel say, as long as my intention is true to the words, that's not called sheker. That's not sheker. That which it says, Midvar Sheker Tirchak, Midvar Sheker Tirchak, even a dibur lavad, even just the words of sheker is also. That's talking about tzaddik, naki v'tzaddik al paroi. That's when it comes to bezdin, etc. So says Rav Vosner, so we passing on this one like Beis Hillel, which means I'm allowed to say something that is objectively true, but will be understood as not being true. When Rav Papa said that Rava said halacha is like Beis Hillel, Rav Papa meant Amar Rava. In general, the halacha is like Beis Hillel, which is 100% true. Now, Rav Papa knew that Rav Huna Bar Ika is going to understand that as referring to the case of Shemen and Hadas, because he asked him, "Don't you go like Rabbi Yochanan? You said halacha is like Beis Shammai." Is Rava told me halacha like Beis Hillel. in that context, in that conversation, it's clearly going to be understood that Rav Papa is referring to this machlokes Beisil v'Shammai. But Zog Rav Wosner, since objectively what Rav Papa uttered was true, Amar Rava, halacha kibeis Hillel. That's true. So therefore, it's not sheker, it's not a violation of Midvar Sheker Tirchak, since he's doing it for a constructive reason, to save himself from embarrassment.
You're comparing it basically to the Yaakov and Esav case, right? That's
yes. Yeah, it's not sheker. Rav Wosner's mention is not sheker me'ikr hadin, because even though it's clear that even b'chai gavna lahutarak l'tzorich amipnei kavod habriyas k'shvach hakal chai gavna. It's only mutter, if I was negligent and I spilled coffee on someone's jacket and I stained the jacket, right? So I can't say I'm embarrassed. I can't say Ellie spilled the coffee. I say Ellie's a nice person. I spilled the coffee. I can't do that, right? I mean, it has to be with sorich or for covered abris. I would have said that if I made a mistake, I can't cover it. I can't cover it with a sheker, with this type of sheker. But Rav Papa made a mistake. But Rav Papa's mistake was only to himself. I mean, definitely, if a person did something wrong to someone else, I cannot do whatever I want and then say now it's covered abris. I have to lie. I can lie in this way to save myself from embarrassment. We're talking about where there's something out of control, or there's a case of a mitzvah of the kala, or there's some sort of tzarech. Then it's mutter. Otherwise, it's a very dangerous stop. How come you didn't clean up your room? I yell at my kid. So he's going to say, Shimon, I did, and then Shimon ruined it. And then that means I did not clean up my room, and Shimon did nothing, and I ruined it. You can play games and never tell the truth. So this can only be used when it's tzarech or tzarech mitzvah. That's the yisoid. The yisoid is as long as the words are emes, and it's for a purpose, so then that's considered to be emes. So like Eli said, that's Esav, that's Yaakov and Esav. That's also really essential. The Tosfos is trying to said back in the Gemara Yevamos as well, that the words objectively were true, and therefore that's not sheker. So that's the chiddush l'dina over here, that a person can say this never heter to outright lie. That's the chumrah we're coming out with. To outright lie, there's never heter. But if, as long as I can say it in a way that I could touch it up as being true, and there's a tzorich or a dvar mitzvah, then a person is allowed to lie and for other mitzvah purposes. So I want to now discuss, maybe end off, but if it's time we can go back to some of the other Marmakoimis. Rav Dessler, number 15, Michtav Melio on page 4. Rav Dessler has a piece on what is emes and what is sheker, and it brings this chiddush of Rav Wosner, brings a full circle, all these sources back together. And Rav Dessler asks, Mahu emes, Mahu sheker. What is truth and what are lies? B'tchilas chinuchenu hevanu. In the beginning of our education, we understood, we were taught that truth is what a person says over facts, right? Today it was hot. Today it was sunny. It's a fact, and that's emes. The sheker k'shemeshanim izeh. Today it rained the whole day. That is false, and that's a sheker. That's the kindergarten understanding of emes and sheker. But that only applies to Rav Dessler in very simple cases. But l'maisa, there are many, many situations where that's not true. For example, he says, if someone someone asks you, is Yankel a nice guy? And he's really obnoxious, and the person's not asking for any talis. So to say he's obnoxious is true, right? It's true. You want to know, is he sloppy? Is his shirt always untucked, right? So I know his shirt is always untucked. So to say that, if there's no talis, even though it's emes, it's also to say it, right? So we can't say you can always tell the emes, you can always tell the truth. It's not true, right? If it's lashon hara, if it's poskim, someone's friend, so then the emes is going to damage, and it's also to say over a fact. It's also to say that which is true. So he wants to say, Rav Dessler, emes is that which brings to Ratzon Hashem, to good and to Ratzon Hashem. The sheker hu mashin nois natzlacha la'asakav shal sar ha-sheker v'atzitra dachra. Sheker is defined as helping the Yetzer Hara, the Satan, become successful. So it's not about saying over what happened or changing facts, is what I'm saying furthering the cause of Yiddishkeit. L'chein, he says, a person will never be able to be emes dik as long as he's controlled by his Yetzer Hara and he has his own biases. His eyes are blind. And he can, move everything over to just to fit with his agenda. There's different ways you can describe the same situation. And a person has a certain Yetzer Hara, he'll describe it in a certain way. And he says like this, he says, even if a liar, let's say, a person who's a Baal Sheker, happens to say a few things that are true, but it's all to further his own agenda, that is going to be considered Sheker, even though it really is true. So he says, who are we going to learn this from, if not from this mice of Yaakov and Esav? He says, L'chayra, Yaakov was the trickster, and Esav was the honest person. Aval gilo kan mishpat shamayim ma'u emes ma'u sheker. In that very incident between Yaakov and Esav, the Torah uncovered for us what is emes, what is sheker. Yaakov asa arma. Yaakov did the actual trickery where he said things that were understood not to be true, but he did it all against his will. He didn't want to do that. That's not what he wanted to do. He was crying. It was onus al pi hadibur. He was forced to do it. He wasn't trying to get the bracha because he wanted to have the larger portion. He was trying to put into effect, to execute the Ratzon Hashem. That's what he wanted to do. And that is called emes. Sheker l'shein emesu. A sheker that's for Hashem is called emes. But Esav is the opposite. Esav tried. He asked his father, "How do I mafresh shumas and ma'asos on straw and on salt?" And he was doing, when no one was looking, these averos chamuras. He was doing all these averos out of his father's view. And he was medactic with the etiquette of his family. He only got married at age 40. Esav was the one who was mechadish, that I can do all the averos in the world, at the same time be a mechubatik mention, an honored person. Scandal, he says, no scandals happen to Esav. Imagine if the non-frum world would have seen the mice of Yaakov and Esav. How would the newspapers have reported on that? Right? The frum Jew, Hashem, he tricks his old father into giving him a bracha, and poor Esav, you see, Esav's the one who's carrying on Yitzchak's Messiah. Look how medactic he is in Trumas and Meiseris, and he got married at 40, and Yaakov is the one who's off the derech, and now he's tricking. Ha-gentleman hazeh ukulei sheker. Says Rav Dessler, this gentleman Esav is all sheker. V'chol ma she'oisehu chelik ha-mishamash klei l'chaim ha-mizuyofim chai sheker shelo. And everything Esav does, even if he happens to tell the truth, whatever he's doing is all sheker. It's all coming to facilitate his wicked and his krum, his bent agenda. And when when you're dealing with a trickster, you have to trick. You have to be made for his aids. You have to try to stop him whatever you can, in any way you can. Says Rav Dessler, emes and sheker on a deeper level is less connected to, am I saying over facts objectively versus changing facts? Yaakov was emes li'Yaakov, right? Emes li'Yaakov, that was his midah, even though he pulled off one of the biggest scams in the history of the world, to which we benefit from till today. That's because emes is furthering the Ratzon Hashem. That's the definition of emes. I'm curious when we get in the Orchot Tzadikim Shir, emes and sheker, how he's going to define it. Rav Dessler's definition is emes is doing whatever I have to do to push forward the agenda of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and sheker is anything I have to do to push forward any other agenda. Even if that person is saying over facts, if he's pushing a false agenda, that's sheker. So it kind of complements Rav Vosner as well. It's al derech Rav Vosner. Rav Vosner is saying that you can say words that are going to be understood as sheker if it's l'te'elis. The leeway that we have to actually fib, to say things in a way that we know will be understood, not the way they happened, is only to push forth, to facilitate the Kadosh Baruch Hu's agenda. So these two ideas, Rav Dessler and Rav Vosner, they both complement each other. But the main nekuda I want us to come away with tonight is this clear gather of when a person is allowed to be mishana from the truth. And there are two criteria. Number one is that the words that are being said have to be able to be understood at least in a way that's emes, that's actually true, it's factual. And second, it has to be a tzorech. And the only suffix is, it's a dangerous concept because a person can use and abuse this cloud. For shalom, in order to save oneself from busha, we have in the Gemara B'Metzia and Daf of Gimel of Dalet. We had a mice of lying about, are you holding in this Masechta? You can say no for anivas, for tznius. Someone asks a question that's inappropriate. I can answer no for tznius reasons. So there are times where lying is not only justified, but actually it's mandated. But we have to be careful not to apply it. It shouldn't be that now I can do whatever I want, and if you catch me, so I could lie. Right? So it's a balance, and the shaila has to be asked. But the unique thing about this sugya is that you would have thought that Gemara in Ksubis is about Kates Mak Ne'akala. It's not such a halachic Gemara. Okay, it's Basil B'Shamai, but there's no clear gather definition to what Basil hold. And Rav Vosner comes and he has a very geshmak together. This idea that the words are true, but my kavanah is different than the way it's going to be understood. In such a case, that's mutter, and we should all be zoichet to be able to apply that in the proper fashion.
Well, in the case of the kala, actually, were the words themselves true? I thought we said they're actually not true. That this kala is beautiful, and the chasuda, that they're factually not true. But or are you saying the fact that maybe the guy who's saying it, his intention is, her midos are beautiful, or her family's beautiful, so therefore it is really true?
Yes, that's what we're saying. So we're saying that.
Okay.
The words are objectively true, because when I say someone's beautiful, if I say this person has beautiful midas, right? The word beautiful can refer to midas. The stam understanding the word is a physical beauty, but it can refer to midas. So he says she's beautiful, he means her midas. So he's saying words that are objectively true.
What about other stories in the Gemara that you have, like the city of Luz, where nobody ever told a sheker or whatever, and nobody ever died in that city, and then all of a sudden the guy said one word or one line of sheker, the whole city changed and they all started dying. That's
a very good point. That's in Brachos also, right?
I forget which Masechta is in, but
so there, what was the case? Oh, no, I saw. What did I see that? Maybe it was in Chavos Loves. The case there was someone asked for someone's father or mother, and they were bathing. The person didn't want to say they were bathing. It's not sneeze. So he said something else. They're not home or whatever. They're sleeping. So, and that so maybe he said it in a way that was for sure sheker. Meaning, let's take that case. Right? You don't want to say that she's taking a shower. So you say that she's sleeping. So according to what we've seen, that you can't do. You might say she's unavailable. She's not available now, or
But in the case of Stua, you would be allowed to say something like that. I thought, no.
Like if
somebody asks you, did your wife go to the mikveh tonight? You can say no, she didn't. When in fact, yes, she actually did, right?
Right. So that was before you. You're right. That was. How's that going to fit?
Yes.
Only cost me the Avdi Rabban the Mishana made me lie. The Mesech is before you be shpizim. Before you, Shishir is Yomer Love. Midas Sniyasu. You're right. That's an excellent point. Rashi and B'Metzia Yomer Lav.
Mhm.
Is there okay? Shaz, if you could also fit that in, if you can construe that also, like no, I didn't 5 minutes ago. I wonder if there's a way.
I mean, I hear that, but stretch this rule so far that it seems like you're always teetering on the edge of major checker when really you're playing like huge games, you know?
That's the danger with this halacha, right?
Yeah.
Is that you can mamish take it. So let me bleed out. Let me try to research that this week, and maybe we'll start off next week for a few minutes just with that, and we'll go on to the next topic.
Okay, fine. Yeshua, thank you.